presence also affects people around you. So, wonderful practice, meetings, and so on are great places. I can hear a phone ringing somewhere.
I think it's behind us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is the world we live in.
This is the world we live in.
Well, maybe it's my phone. No, it isn't. Time to take a selfie.
Lovely.
And post it on Facebook.
Yeah.
This is me in, where are we? San Francisco.
What does it mean when the most present person on the planet says, "Where are we again?" It means that you're in our conversation and in our conversation.
We are here. That's all we need to know.
That's lovely. That's wonderful. Well, I think we should talk a little bit about devices, given that exchange. And I have to tell you all, I did have the honor of being seated at the table next to Eckhart at dinner a couple of years ago, and I kept thinking, well, first of all, I have to put all my devices away and make sure they're all turned off, because that would just be awful if anything happened. And then I thought, I wonder, if you live as a Luddite, I wonder if you actually live device-free, and you probably have people who read email for you and take phone calls for you, because how else can you be fully in the now? And so I had this sort of image, my story about you. It was flattering, but it was, elevated a bit. And yes, exactly, exactly. And so we're talking at some point, and we got to talking about dogs, because we are both deep dog lovers. And all of a sudden, you said, "Well, let me show you a picture of my dog." And out comes the phone and the dog with Kim. And we sat.
I love dogs.
Love dogs, and I took out my phone then a little bit sheepishly, and we exchanged pictures of dogs. And so I said, okay, well, that preconceived notion is gone. You actually have a phone, and it's a smartphone, not like an old phone, and you use it, and there's pictures on it. And so you became quite human in that moment to me. I already admired you. You just became even more human then. So we live in this device world, and you do too. And so we're here in part because of the intersection of technology and our wisdom practices. And technology can be helpful, but it often isn't, and can be distracting. And you spoke about that during your meditative lecture, I'll call it. How's that as a label?
Yes.
So how have you navigated the temptation of device distraction, and how can we collectively learn how to continue to stay present? It's really part of the essence of this conference, is how do we live in this digital age? Some of your thoughts on that.
Well, I am connected now to the digital world, but not as much as most people, I must admit. I have a cell phone, and I have a first-generation iPad, and and I have the iPad Mini too, which Kim gave me for my birthday, and I enjoy them. I get emails, but not in the way that most people get emails, because most emails go to the office, and only a few people. I really admire Ariana, who earlier today gave you all her email address, and I must admit I'm not going to do that.
Fair enough.
One reason being, although it might be good practice for you, but one reason being is it's unlikely that you would get an answer, and that would be good practice for you to say, "Oh, no answer," rather than building a story around it. This is a similar, if I may just diversion. Sometimes people send me books, well, not sometimes. I am drowning in manuscripts and books that people send me, and I was the same when I wrote The Power of Now. Somebody said, you must send this book to Deepak and to Oprah. And I said, okay, I'll send it. Of course, I didn't get any answer from Deepak or Oprah at first. They don't actually look at the books. They can't. They are drowning in stuff. So they cannot look at these things. Fortunately, I didn't have an ego that would indulge in saying, they didn't even bother to reply to me. Who are they? They pretend to be enlightened and didn't even bother to send me a little card. Isn't that a lovely story for the ego? The ego loves getting in there and saying, hey, well. But it was fine. They didn't answer, and that's all, and it was fine. And 2 or 3 years later, the book reached them in some way, but not because I sent it to them. So the universe somehow arranged it. So people have stories quickly about things like that. So no emails, because you probably wouldn't get an answer. And those few people who have my email address, most of them know that they may or may not get an answer. And they're fine with it. I use sometimes texting, which I quite enjoy, not obsessively, but I use it from time to time with people. And as I mentioned 2 years ago, perhaps already, I sometimes enjoy sending a space message rather than a text message, which goes like this. You press on open bracket, you have an empty space, you go, then you close the bracket, and then you send it. And when that person receives it, their phone goes bing, or whatever it does, and they go, oh, a message without content, pure space. So, and then later I found a term for it, spacing. So I recommend it, but I would talk to the people beforehand to say that you might get a space message from me, otherwise they won't know what's going on. Yeah. So I also noticed that there is an addictive quality to these things. There's to the internet, and there's an addictive quality to all these gadgets. There's already an addictive quality to watching television, which was a thing before all these gadgets came. Television was the main psychologically addictive thing, and people were glued to their sets. But now, with all those, we need to be aware, and several speakers have, of course, gone into it in more detail than I can. There are enormous possibilities of connectedness and the dissemination of information in our digital age. There are wonderful possibilities opening up, and some people are fully using, like Ariana, and so people are fully using, and Oprah, they're fully using the possibilities that this offers, reaching people and getting the message out. But there are also enormous dangers for, as I mentioned a little earlier, the stuff that people identify with as themselves, and the incessant stream of thinking, that, of course, that wasn't created by the digital devices, but it's being the addiction to stuff, the addiction to the next thought and the next, and having to go wherever it wants to pull you, which is an unconscious addiction. Really, I call it the addiction to thinking. Usually when people talk about addiction, they don't think of thinking, but thinking, for most people, is addictive, and because and it's toxic in many cases. So it's like a drug. Because why is it a drug? Because their sense of who they are is bound up with thinking. They've got to think about my life. There's no such thing as your life, except as a story in the head. Life is now. You are life. You are that. So the gadgets, they amplify that tendency that was already there been there for thousands of years, So the next thing, they tend to fill your mind up even more with one thing after another. Facebook, Twitter, text message, email, web surfing. It all comes in and you have to, and the mind reaches there. Whatever thing demands the mind's attention, the mind immediately goes there. And at night, it's wonderful that Ariana said she has a bedroom that is free of devices, and that's a wonderful practice. There you have created space. We need some discipline. Otherwise, the technology, which has enormous potential, may destroy us. I don't know, if you look at the children, young children, no longer interacting with their peers, their parents, they don't physical movement. Many become obese at 5 years of age because they don't move anymore, and their mind gets sucked into the devices. And they feel if you take it away from them, they experience enormous pain in the same way that an addict experiences pain when you remove the drug. He goes, give me my iPad, can't live with my iPad. And other attention deficit disorder comes in of can't focus on anything for very long because these gadgets are one image flashes one after another. So if you want to write a dystopian science fiction novel, dystopian, as you know, meaning a negative utopia, I would suggest write new technology arises, it has an addictive effect, the generation that's growing up grows up with it, it prevents people from focusing attention for anything for very long, which is the prerequisite for coming up with anything creative, is to become still, go within, and then creative solution comes. So a generation grows up that is completely out of touch with their inner being. They can no longer find creative solutions to problems because the deeper place where creativity arises is not accessible to them anymore. And 2 or 3 generations later, the entire civilization collapses. This is a dystopian novel which you can write as a warning for what could happen, but this is a good sign. The fact that we are here, yes. It's not going to go that way, but it could.
Right. It seems to me there are two potential problems that are interrelated, and one is the presence of the devices themselves, which we've talked about, and practicing discipline. And as you say, a number of speakers have talked about rituals, in a sense, or habits or rules for themselves that allow discipline around when and how to use them. And the other is that the devices essentially just bring one's work closer. But the work is a different kind of pressure, and I think we have a room of people, many of whom are extremely committed to the work that they're doing, the careers, their professions, the world-changing work or the device-creating work, but it's or both in the same person. There's a level of pressure and excitement and ambition and so forth. And so if you imagine the person who works in the sort of competitive, fast-paced, very exciting technology environment, how do you integrate stillness into that in a way that doesn't feel like you have to choose to step off the train? You know, can you be still and be in an environment that is as wild as that?
Yes, that's very challenging. Of course, to realize that if you don't find the space within where the stuff of your mind is transcended, then sooner or later you will encounter suffering, a lot of suffering, and you will burn out, and you will no longer have any creative ideas, and you will just maybe try to problem solve. So you need to realize, first of all, the importance for yourself. It is more important, as has been said today by various speakers, much more important than what you achieve in this world, because it's all relative, and nothing is going to last for that long. Much more important than what you achieve is the awakening within you, the awakening of consciousness, knowing who you are beyond all that, knowing what we could call the transcendent dimension to who you are, which goes back thousands of years in human spirituality. They've all pointed to it in different ways, in different words. And if you don't realize that is the most important thing in your life, then you're going to become unhappy if you're not unhappy already. Some young people have a residue of vitality, so they might not be unhappy yet, but then they use that up, and then they become very unhappy because they've never found anything beyond the stuff of their minds. And that is a terrible fate. So that is why this is so important. So that requires then some decisions perhaps and discipline on your part, so that you do not allow those things to take over your life in the same way that you do not allow your mind to take over your life. And of course, in many cases, even long before these digital gadgets, the human mind has tended to take human beings over and say, this is who I am, me, the story self. So it requires discipline and some kind of perhaps even a routine, one being what was suggested earlier, not to engage in communication through like emails between a certain time period, whatever it may be, evening and morning, so that at night when you wake up you don't go there. And for your children also create space, only allow them, you probably cannot totally take it away from them because it's in the culture, it's everywhere, but create a structure so that for a certain amount of time, and don't let the children get lost in the digital world. It's a terrible fate. Don't allow the dystopian novel that I just mentioned to become reality.
Right.
It will become reality if you allow your children to get totally lost in the digital realm, so that becomes more important to them than the life. They can no longer relate to a tree. We come back to trees. They can no longer relate to the river. They cannot. Sensory experience disappears from their lives, and it's all concepts and digital images. It's a terrible thing.
It's a distressing. So I'm not going to let you end on the dystopian novel, but our friends with the ringing phone have told us we've used our extra time.
Oh, okay.
I know, it went quickly. So rather than end on the dystopia, can you tell us briefly, where does your hope come from? So we can end with a sense of hope.
My hope comes out of this moment, being here with you.
Should I have known that?
So